Goal is I'm going to read a sentence or phrase. I want you to share, do you think is underrated or overrated? Nothing is off limits here.
Okay.
VO2 testing for people who aren't athletes is invaluable. True or false?
VO2 max is excellent for the average person.
Not eating or sleeping enough after working out is worse than not working out at all.
You got to have sleep and nutrition.
Would you say that there's anything super trendy right now?
With women's health and exercise, you hear a lot about when to train during the menstrual cycle. And, this is when you can perform because you're at the best based on your hormones. There's no science behind any of it that's out there now. It's really bad.
Everyone should wear a glucose monitoring device to gain more personal insights at least once in their life. Welcome to the Rehab podcast, your source for expert insights, breakthrough tech, and business strategies shaping the future of physical therapy. If you care about training smarter, staying strong as you age, or using science to boost your performance, this episode's for you. We're joined by Dr. Todd Schroeder, my former USC professor, director of the Clinical Exercise Research Center, and a leader with 25 plus years of research in performance, recovery, and longevity. His work bridges science and real-world practice, helping clinicians like me deliver better evidence-based care. We dive into why muscle is key to lifelong health, how tech is shaping the future of training, and the biggest mistakes people make when trying to optimize their body. Plus, Todd reveals the most underrated recovery tool, and it's not what you'd expect. If you enjoy this episode, check out our VO2 Max video. Dr. Schroeder breaks down how it impacts your health, how to improve it, and even takes me through the test in his lab to see where I stand. Get ready to learn from one of the best. Welcome, Dr. Todd Schroeder. Dr. Schroeder, thanks for taking the time today to come join us.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I know we've been in contact for a bit, and it's great to see what you guys have done and fun to be at the headquarters here.
Yeah, you got to check it out today.
I know. It's excellent seeing all of you, meeting the new people on board.
There's a lot of new faces outside of just Mike Arash and I. It's crazy to think that we met 10 years ago. And what was the joke that you were cracking earlier? How we wanted to film in your lab?
Yeah. Well, when you guys started, you came in, you're like, hey, can we film a little bit here on the equipment in my lab? And I'm like, sure, go for it. These guys don't know what they're doing. And, look at you now.
Still not fully sure of what we're doing, but have an idea.
You got a good team to help you out.
That's right. They keep us focused.
Yeah.
So, I'm excited. There's a lot to cover today. I have like a fun template that we're going to dive into today, and I know that you're the perfect fit for it. But before we get there, I know that Mike Arash and I, we know a lot about you, and I was so pumped that you were able to block time to join us because I'm like, man, he's going to be awesome on camera. But I would love for you to share with our audience who is Dr. Todd Schroeder and how did you even get into this field compared to what it is that you're doing today?
Yep. Sounds good. And again, thanks for having me. And I got to start off by saying, I've taught to USC physical therapy students for 25 years. And I know when we have a good one, when I had my volunteer haunted house and I needed scare actors and you stood up and said, I'll help out. And, it goes a long ways, so I appreciate that. And so, here we are. I mean, I've, again, been at USC for 25 years. I'm not a physical therapist. I'm trained as an exercise physiologist. I do a lot of muscle physiology, endocrinology. Over the years, teaching to the physical therapy students, I've also developed a lot of clinical research, and that's my interest, is working with humans. So I've worked in rehab, prehab, performance, all different populations from childhood obesity to master athletes, cancer survivors, and a lot of orthopedic rehabilitation studies. But with that, because I have such a diverse background, and that's kind of the fun of being an exercise physiologist, I get exposed to new things. And I have a lot of companies that come to me that are interested in me kind of trying their products, giving them feedback on it. So it kind of introduced me to technology and new developments in industry. And because of that, I formed my own company called K2 Sciences to work with industry in the development of new products. And so that's been a lot of fun. And again, I get exposed to new things, which is great. Sometimes we're just consulting, giving information on how this new product can be used in physical therapy or health and wellness or with elite athletes. And other times it's doing full-blown clinical trials. And I've done everything, from pharmaceutical space to new exercise equipment, to shoes, you name it, been there. A lot of wearable devices, and some of the stuff we might come up today just talking. I don't often say the names of the products specifically, just because I work with so many different companies. I don't endorse one per se as better than another, but yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm most excited, because personally, I've always been in the gadgets.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just been a thing since I was a kid. I was really in the video games, and then all the wearables, even going back to, I think, like the first Nike band. I'm blanking on the name, what it was, but I was like, this thing is cool. And then when Whoop got started, it was like, okay, get in the Whoop. And now somehow I've worn this thing for as long as I've been married. Yeah, all three of us. And then back to when we were students, being in your lab doing VO2 max testing.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what it was. You would give like $200.
$100.
You were waving $100 bill in class, and you're like, whoever has a VO2 max greater than 50 or 55, right? Like $100.
Yeah.
Like challenge accepted. And I was like, well, I have no shot of that one. So
well, now maybe you've been training.
Maybe on the bike. I don't think running. That's where I wanted to go today. And I'd love to hear more about K2 Sciences. Like, when did you start this, and what does your day-to-day look like now?
Yeah, I'm a full-time professor at USC, and I love working with students and doing research. But again, that's given me opportunity outside of USC to connect with industry and in development of products. And I bring a lot of that back to my teaching and into the lab, and even working with physical therapists outside of USC. Once students graduate, like yourself, move on and develop a career in PT. And I've worked with a lot of graduates in different projects as well. But the K2 Sciences that we formed, I have a business partner who's got a background more on the business side. I'm the chief science officer. But between the two of us, we've put together a large team of consultants. And again, we work with a number of different companies in different aspects. Our portfolio keeps getting bigger and bigger, and we can only do so much. But we kind of pick and choose who we want to work with and what the products are, and if we think they're going to have an influence in the industry, health and wellness. And because really that's, I like to take technology and find how it's applicable in different situations. And that's what we're doing now, even in the physical therapy space, is bringing technology into physical therapy and rehabilitation. I know you're great with your manual skills and hands-on stuff, but sometimes it's good to have technology to assist with that.
For sure. And I think I have some interesting questions to run by you to get your input on that. But for our audience, it's a mix of the average Joe, someone that's just interested in health, wellness, fitness. And then there's also a lot of professionals who follow us too. I thought it was going to be a lot of fun to have you come on the podcast, because to me, you're like my closest connection to someone like Andrew Huberman, where you've had all these years of experience doing research, doing trials, also educating and teaching, and also great personality too, like a great guy. What you didn't include in the Halloween thing is I had a root canal that failed when I was a first year student, and I woke up in this terrible pain. Long story short, I had to get a implant on my front tooth, and they're like, you're going to have a flipper. And I'm like, what is a flipper? And they told me, I'm like, okay, wow. And this is like the first year that I'm dating my now wife. And I'm like, if she sticks through this with me, like, she's got to be a keeper, because I had a fake front tooth and it was a flipper, like a retainer, and you would just pop it in and out. It was like a great party trick, or like at the restaurant. And it was the perfect fit for your Halloween theme that year. And I was like, well, I'll be a great volunteer and just have this like missing tooth.
Absolutely.
So the Huberman thing with today, right? It's the biggest thing why we got into what we're doing now with Prehab 10 years ago was education. When we would take breaks from your class, it was, all right, let's go on Instagram, see what content is there. And we would just see a lot of misinformation. And now today, there's an abundance of information online. But the problem is everyone has an opinion. And then more importantly, everyone has gotten pretty creative with how they cut videos and produce them. So it's hard to kind of know what is true, what isn't. And I just would love to get your input today as to how would you break down all this new technology, right? It's like, okay, well, if I'm going to get into a gym, well, what technology am I going to use and why? Do I need to track my sleep? Do I need to track my steps? And it can ultimately be like paralysis by analysis for the average person, where it's like, maybe you just need to put on shoes and go outside and go for a walk and not track anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we're at. And especially with the advancement in technology now and AI and VR and everything that's out there. And it's a fun place to be. It's an overwhelming place to be. And especially for the patient or the average person or the professional athlete. I mean, we try and get certain trackers on athletes and they're like, well, I don't want that information. Or if it tells the coach I'm not doing so well, how's that affect my contract? And, there's a lot going on there. But the average person for the most part is interested in what the data tells them. If it's too cumbersome, if it's too hard to use an app, if there's too much data. I mean, I know I had a physical therapist come to me, had force plates, wanted to use them in the clinic and got 600 pieces of information, variables in the output. And he's like, what do I do with it? What does it mean? And so that's where I've tried to develop something that we help physical therapists or coaches, athletes in fine tuning what data is important for that individual or that athlete. And again, there's so much out there and you can be overwhelmed on the internet. I mean, I get overwhelmed. People approach me with new products. I'm like, I've never tried that. I've never heard of it, but I'll try it out. I'll give you my feedback and see. And some things shock me. They're much better. They work better than I ever thought they would. Other times there's a lot of money behind something and it doesn't do much. And, you have, professional athletes endorsing it and it's still not so good. But, you mentioned Whoop or the Aura Ring or, Fitbit and those type of things. And they're great if people use them. A lot of people buy them and they're kind of exciting for a little while and then they're tired of tracking their data. It takes a certain person to use it over time, but it can be very valuable. The technology is good to track movement, hydration, sleep, heart rate, all those kind of things, workload, that, you can benefit a lot from if you know how to use that data.
So then with your current day-to-day, would you say your passion lies in trying to help connect the average end user to like this next great product? Or are you focused on just trying to help the average person or even the professional just learn how to best leverage technology with what it is their goal is?
I mean, it's probably a little of both of that. I mean, my ultimate goal, I love new things in technology, but to apply it to help people, whether it's recover from an injury or just improve their performance. Some people, I tell them, the best thing you can do is just go for a walk. You mentioned put on your shoes and go for a walk. You don't need any technology for that, but they don't do it. How do you get them to do it? Will they, look at their watch and go, oh, hey, okay, I'm getting steps in. And obviously that started early on, the step count thing. And that worked for a fair number of people. You got to find what works for each individual. And so really that's why I like all the different types of technology. Some people will wear an Oura Ring. Some people will wear a Whoop watch, and some people will put in a mouthpiece to look at, impacts on the field, whether it's, for concussion prevention for soccer or football and, that type of thing. And so there's so much that technology can provide for health and wellness in all populations. And it's like, oh, this professional athlete is using that, so I should. There is that, but really it's down to you and me and how we're doing. I know you train a little bit for triathlons and you probably use some technology. I mean, Garmin watch and, tracking
maybe a little
sleep.
Bit too much, but I do love it. I mean, it's every year, how can I add more technology and what data points should I keep tabs on? I think the biggest thing why I like data is some of it helps me with like prospectively, okay, how do I want to adjust my week, or what do I want to focus on in this next training session? But in the rehab space, and then even for myself, I think the biggest benefit of data is, okay, if there is an issue, there is an injury, or like recently I got super sick, why did that happen? And at least let me look at the data leading up to that event. And I think that's where there's a ton of value in data. And I think that's a big thing that like pro athletes and sports teams, they really want that data, especially rehab professionals. You know, if someone comes in, they tear their ACL, and okay, well, we need to get baseline metrics because we can't manage what we don't measure, but we have no previous track record.
Right.
So if I test your strength today, well, I don't know where the anchor is lying because we never did this in the past. So that's why I like data.
Correct. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that's something I'm passionate about, and have teamed up with some PTs to do that, where we actually screen all the patients that come into the clinic with some base testing to have baseline on them. And I'm not talking about they've come in with a torn ACL already, but they are in for whatever. It could be strength and conditioning, but we have some baseline data on them. So we know over time, if they do get injured and come back, we have a baseline on them. But, you know, with athletes, you know, super important to track over time, look at overtraining and fatigue, especially in endurance athletes. And, you know, it sounds like you're excited about data. You like it. A lot of people don't. They're like, I don't want to see the numbers. Don't show me the numbers. Just a lot of times it's like, give me a summative color, you know, red, I'm good, or I'm bad today because it's red. Give me the green. How do I get green? You know,
Yeah.
and real simple like that. And so it's finding that for each individual person. And that's the struggle. And companies struggle with that. Like, how do you make the data digestible? How is it actionable? All the sports teams that say, hey, we've got all this data. Now, how do we use it? How do we implement it into our players? And it's challenging. And there's lots of thoughts out there.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect segue for where I want to go. And the goal is to have fun with this. I do want you to put your personal opinion out there. We have to draw a line in the sand somewhere. But it's a matter of how deep do we go with it? Do you not want to share why on it? So nothing is off limits here.
Okay.
Just your own governor. But the goal is I'm going to read a sentence or phrase, and then I want you to share, do you think it's underrated or overrated? And if so, why? And then, you know, you may catch me off guard and I'm going to be like, oh, I wasn't thinking that. And, you know, let's dive into it. So,
Excellent.
So with that said, we've talked a lot about technology already, right? But like, for instance, fitness trackers and smartwatches that can track your daily steps and monitor your heart rate are accurate and reliable. Underrated or overrated?
I'd say rated, not over or under. They're good. Early on, they weren't so good, but they're very good now and important to use if that's of interest to you. And so, yes, they're accurate. Heart rate, steps, movement, you know, they've gotten smaller. They're more accurate. You know, they're all based with algorithms, but prediction of VO2 max, not so good, just so you know.
Yeah, so the VO2 max, that was another one that I had here, where VO2 testing for people who aren't athletes is invaluable. Is that maybe there's another option too, true or false? Which, by the way, when we were students, you guys tortured us for 3 years where we would want a yes or no answer. And every time we got, it depends. So the fact that you hit me with a rated today, I'm like, I should have predicted that.
You should have. But I'll give you some solid responses. VO2 max is excellent for the average person. It was used, you know, it's the assessment, the maximum amount of oxygen you can use during exercise, and it represents cardiorespiratory fitness, so how fit you are. And largely it's been used over the years for endurance athletes. The more fit you are, the higher amount of oxygen you can use, and it just kind of predicts performance. Nowadays, they're recognizing because it represents cardiovascular fitness, cardiorespiratory fitness, that it predicts longevity. There was an article in the New York Times earlier this year that talked about that. And so there's a lot of average people now that want to get a VO2 max test because of the representation of health by just getting that test done. Now it's challenging. You got to push yourself. The VO2 max, you're pushing yourself to the physiological maximum to get good data, the response of the lungs, the heart, and use of oxygen in the body. But it's an excellent test. And now I'm getting more and more inquiries for testing. That's something we've added into our sites as well, to provide VO2 max testing to those that aren't elite athletes.
And to give everyone some fun insight, 9 years ago, Mike Rosh and I strapped to bikes or treadmills. You got what looks like a gas mask strapped to your face. And then you got Todd over here waving a $100 bill in front of your face saying,
I taped it to the mirror in front of you.
That's what it was. You taped it. And you're like, who can get it? I would agree. I do think that VO2 max testing is valuable for people who aren't athletes, because I do think it is a great metric to see where your health stands, right? And like Dr. Peter Attia talks about this a lot, where we're always trying to think, where do we want to be in life in the future? And if I'm 34 years old now and I want to be able to lift 100 pounds 20 years from now, well, I better be lifting even more than 100 pounds now easily. And I think the same thing applies for VO2, where for the average person, if they want to be able to travel, that's a big thing when you retire, where I just want to be able to travel, or I want to be able to get up and down with kids, whatever it may be. The more that someone kind of understands what your VO2 max needs to be at that point is important to know, because, let's evaluate your VO2 max now and see where you stand. And if you're just at that now, it's like, well, you got to get to work, because your VO2 max is only going to drop as you get older if you're not doing anything with it. But what I would want to get your opinion on is, especially in the endurance world, okay, VO2 max is good, but then a lot of people hit at it where, if we're looking at a triangle, right? Like VO2 max is just the top of the triangle. And there's a time and place to train VO2 max. But if you're doing long distance triathlon, or even if you want your VO2 max to get better, majority of your training should be done at the bottom of the pyramid, where you're doing a lot of base training, but zone 2 training. Right. And it's like Tagacha, he won the Tour de France this year and like crushed everyone. And he talks about how 80% of his time, if not more, is done zone 2 training. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. And, zone 2 training is something that's out in the media, and a lot of people come to me, oh, I'm supposed to be doing zone 2 training. And I'm like, well, that's great. You burn a significant amount of fat in zone 2 training too, if that's your goal, but it helps, based on zone 2, we're talking about where you are in your heart rate zone. And I always tell people that's great, but you need to push into that zone 3, zone 4. And that's kind of where high intensity interval training, or HIIT training, came out of, was having high intensity bursts into what's considered long, slow distance training. And, it will improve VO2 max. And that's one part of the equation. But the other is, what is your lactate threshold relative to your VO2 max? The average person, it might be a lactate threshold of 65% of their VO2 max, regardless of whatever their VO2 max is. You train, your VO2 max goes up, but the goal is to also push that lactate threshold up. And if you can get it closer towards 90% of your VO2 max, then you can operate at a faster pace over a longer period of time. So your performance goes up, and that's the advantage. And that's why pushing out of the zone 2 for training is important, to help elevate your lactate threshold so that you can, at least in the performance realm, do more.
And I would agree with that too. I've been doing endurance training now for 3.5 years. And I would say I have found the most benefits to feel faster and feel like I can go faster for longer, as long as I am consistently doing like that threshold training, that zone 3, zone 4, while also doing enough zone 2 training. We can't forget about zone 2. it's a common cliche. You just can't swing the pendulum too far in either direction. Everything is important. But yeah, all right, that's good. I like that. All right, here's a good one. Overrated or underrated? 3 sets of 10 is an effective exercise plan.
I'm going to say overrated, but there's a base for that. And because you need to adjust for the goals of the individual. But 3 sets of 10 works for a lot of people. And there was no science behind it originally. And I actually have this book here.
Oh, did you bring that?
I brought this because
I thought that was just a placement by the team. I was like, yeah, it's
PRE,
great.
Progressive Resistance Exercise.
I saw Prehab.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's what you saw. That was published, I think, in 1951. And it came out of physical therapy. Captain Delorme wrote this book with Watkins, and it was the first resistance training book or manual. And it came out of physical therapy. They had a paratrooper who got injured, ACL and everything, and they just put him in a brace. And they're like, no, we need to do resistance training, heavy weights. And so they documented that, and they show all these great, you got to take a look at it, exercises. But, exercise has been around for thousands of years, moving rocks and stones for building muscle. But to do it in a way, and this is the basis for 3 sets of 10. And why did they do that? They just thought it was good. There's no scientific basis. And then years after that, we do studies. I've done them, and you look at kind of what do you need for building endurance and muscle? What do you need for building strength? What do you need for power? What do you need for hypertrophy? And so that pendulum swings a bit on the 3 sets of 10, because if you're doing 10 reps, that's kind of right in the middle. It's good for strength and hypertrophy, but it's not ideal for endurance, and it's not ideal for power or strength. And so you'd shift that kind of continuum there of that repetition with the workout. So, it's not overrated. It's very important. You get a lot of benefit, 3 sets of 10, but you could do 4 sets of 25. You could do 2 sets of 4, depending on your goals for strength or endurance.
Yeah. And it goes back to baseline testing, right? You can't manage what you don't measure, and 3 sets of 10, it can be effective if you're measuring it, along with what is your rated perceived exertion, how many reps do you have left after doing those 10 reps. So 3 sets of 10 definitely gets a bad rap, and I think if we had to say overrated or underrated, I'd probably lean towards overrated too, but it deserves some dissecting too.
Yeah,
so
it does. And I'm going to be the professor here. You said rate of perceived exertion. It is a rating of perceived exertion.
Of perceived exertion. Why is it a rating?
Because a rate you rate, a rating is a chart.
Okay.
So that's why.
Wow.
Yeah. Everyone makes that mistake.
I mean, hopefully I got it right on your test.
Yeah. Exactly. Hey, you made it out. You graduated.
That's right. Here I am. A teeth connected as well.
Yeah. How many years was that? You had
with
it
the
popping
tooth?
out? Yeah.
I mean, I think I was only supposed to do it. I only had to do it for like 6 months, but I think I just kind of delayed.
Yeah.
And I had it for like 8 months. I had it for 10 months.
You were like the hockey
I mean, we would
player.
go out in LA, and I'd have like friends from home, and then they would like try to talk to a girl, and they're like, "Oh, Craig, let's say that like you're a professional hockey player and just pop your tooth out." And I was like, I think it's time to get my tooth in.
Yeah.
But that was a good time. Yeah, it looks good. I remember even when I went to get the surgery done, I was such a broke, cheap student. They were like, "All right, so do you want to do anesthesia?" I was like, "How much is it?" And they're like, "Oh, it's like $1,200. I'm like, "No, just like let's locally shoot it up." And that was by far the worst decision one of the worst decisions I've ever made. That was really painful. I wouldn't recommend that. All right, the next one. This is a good one. Clinicians are capable of seeing compensations with their eyes when evaluating something like weight symmetry in a squat. So, Todd, if I were to watch you squat, right, I'm looking at it and, hey, it looks pretty even. You're putting 50% of your weight in each foot. Overrated or underrated?
The clinician?
Or yeah, clinician and or average person.
I would say underrated, because you're trained as a movement scientist, and even though you may not, after graduation, you go out and you're like, I don't feel like I know how to assess movement. You know a lot in your trained eye. And I've worked with a lot of companies with motion capture devices. Some are extremely expensive, some are very cheap, single camera systems. And oftentimes, especially the experienced physical therapists will say, I can do that with my naked eye better than that camera. And that's probably true. And I believe that based on what I've seen. But having the metrics there to be able to compare over time is really important. And that's where having the motion capture systems, and again, that with new technology, the single camera systems, they work. I don't know if you've used them, but they give you information. They're quick and easy to set up. A lot of them you can just use an iPhone or an iPad. It's not as good as a 2-camera system or a true motion capture setup where you'd have to go to a lab or you spend the money to set up in-house. But I think it's really important to understand the value of a trained physical therapist in evaluating motion and movement. I think that's your go-to number one, and you support that with the data.
I thought that you were going to go the other way. And I was thinking, maybe I'm just thinking of edge cases, but like Dr. Susan Sigward, right, has done a lot of ACL research at SC, and we've just been exposed to it. But, I think it's maybe I'm bringing up the edge cases of when people are injured or people had like surgery or they're rehabbing. ACL, someone goes to squat, right, and it looks good, it looks symmetric, and maybe I didn't do a good enough job at asking the question, but is the person using their quad or not? Or like after someone had an Achilles injury, is someone properly using their calf or not? And I think that's where leveraging technology like force plates or if and what motion capture can tell us versus not. There's some of those edge cases where, hey, we think we know what we're seeing, but also sometimes it's not painting the full picture.
Yeah. And, I'm glad you mentioned force plates because oftentimes it's a combination of video motion capture on a force plate. And the amount of information you get from that is pretty remarkable. And, it's Dr. Sigward's work in ACL looking at metrics with both of those. And she has an outstanding lab. But that's, again, that technology has gotten so much less expensive and feasible to bring into clinics. And I saw your Vald Force decks out there. And so testing on those makes it easy and you can get great data and absolutely you can tell based on the mechanics, if you're doing a counter movement jump and you have the video, of how are they balances, are they symmetrical, are they favoring one side over the other, and you can add some EMG in there if you want. Again, EMG systems, I used to pay thousands to run all the wiring for the systems, and now you can spend literally hundreds to a couple thousand and get a great system and look at muscle contractility, the EMG during some of these testings or evaluations. So that's the advantage of technology becoming cheaper and better, and then getting everyone, the average person, the physical therapist, the physician, to use that information.
Here's a good question off a limb, because when we first started creating content, we wanted to implement science into exercise education. We felt like that's what was missing. This guy, he looks jacked. He is jacked on social media. He's telling people what to do because it's good for this muscle. But it was like, I don't know about that. And when we first started creating content, we would lean into a lot of EMG research studies where, hey, this group of clinicians, scientists, they evaluated doing certain muscles, doing certain exercises, and then they were doing EMG, probably like surface, on the muscles to see what was getting the most activation. And it was like, all right, let's do like low trap muscles, or let's do serratus anterior. Let's do these muscles that they don't get a lot of attention in the gym or like in the fitness and wellness industry, but we know that they're really important. And they are the backbone supporters of the deltoids, the pecs, the glutes, whatever it may be. Overrated or underrated EMG studies are valuable? Because a lot of people would rip on us for doing that sometimes, and they would be like the clinician, and they're like, "Oh, you're just like deducing something."
Yeah, and that's a tough one. It depends on the situation, but probably overrated for the most part. EMG is valuable if you know how to use it. And again, it's surface EMG. So it depends on a lot on subcutaneous fat, placement of the EMG. But to give a general idea, it definitely helps. There's science behind it. There's tons of EMG studies out there, but the average science person would call EMG pseudoscience. It just gives a little bit extra information. You wouldn't want to hang your hat on it like, oh, the EMG showed that, so that's why it happens. But combining, using as a tool like you were doing to talk about, oh yeah, these muscles are working, and here, look, the EMG actually shows that in these studies. That's important. It gives that credibility to it.
Yeah, I mean, they're fun tools to play with, especially if you get muscles that are most superficial, right? Like you slap the electrode on the upper traps, you shrug, the machine gets really loud. Okay, you cue the person, hey, don't shrug your shoulders, raise your arm up overhead, and then it's like, oh, it's not as loud. And it's definitely gamifying exercise. I think that's why they're fun too, and that's why we leaned into it. All right, here's another good one. We've talked a little bit about this. Motion tracking technology that can analyze movements and give you feedback can be effective as a physical therapist in person treating you. So let me add more information to this. Imagine like an app, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you download an app off the App Store, and the thing wants to just analyze all your movement, and it's going to tell you everything that's going on, and it's going to spit out this perfect exercise program for you. As good as a PT in person.
Some of them, yes, absolutely. But again, it's how will the PT use that information? And how will they communicate that information to the patient? Maybe they don't. Maybe they just collect it. But a lot of times the patient wants to know, hey, why are you doing that? And what does it mean? And how do you communicate that? That's challenging. But there is a lot of good technology that physical therapists can use to track motion, movement in general, forces, all that, and use that with their own knowledge and what they see to advance the patient in their rehabilitation or in their prevention of injury or in their performance.
What about the average person that is trying to just use that technology and rely on software to tell them what to do? Do you think we're there yet?
We're on the cusp. And again, because of AI and how technology is being used and it can learn, there are companies developing. I mean, I don't know if it's going to replace physical therapists, but watch out. Some people think it might. But it's pretty impressive what it can do based on your movement, how you're performing, and all the data it takes in and tells you what you should do. And then how you progress and modify, it's tracking, and then it can tell you, oh, now you need to do this. And some of it's pretty good. Now, the average person really isn't using that at this point. It's more in the research settings, but it's coming, and it's going to be available. And there already are apps that involve AI and try and advance what you're doing with your exercise. And I don't know if you guys have played with that at all. And how you feel about it. I'd be interested. I mean, how do you feel? Is it encroaching on your profession and your knowledge to know that the computer brain is saying what I should be able to say, and is it doing it better?
I would say that we've always had a very open mindset, and we still maintain an open mindset. A closed mindset is just not going to get you anywhere. It's like, what am I going to learn if I believe I already know everything? And, the next question was, hey, virtual and augmented reality and AI will be the future of physical therapy and fitness. I'm not sure how, but I know that it will be in some facet.
Yeah.
And for us, it is adapt accordingly and lean into what our strengths are and how can we leverage this new technology that is available. I mean, we have people reaching out to us all the time that want to use our videos. I mean, I've had probably 5 emails this week already. Hey, do you have API access for your exercise videos? Because I'm going to build this product and do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, okay, there's a lot of people out there that are trying to do what we're doing, if not better. And that's why upstairs I've always kept a clock with like a little phrase that, hey, a sense of urgency, because someone is always chasing us. There's a target on our back. And there's people out there that probably have better technology than us. So it's on us to stay up to the times and know what will work and what won't work. But early out of school, we were approached by a company and we were advisors with them. And then since then, we had an exit with them. But it was really interesting, that experience, because you're working with developers and you're working with people that are creating companies where they are business people first, or they're technology first. So their perception of what is going to replace physical therapy is much different than our perception as the physical therapist. Like what we're fearful of and what they're trying to accomplish, they're similar, but it's also like, it's not like, what I find interesting is a lot of developers that want to work on motion analysis, they're doing it because they're trying to solve a problem. And to me, the problem is, well, who's paying? And the insurance companies are paying. And the insurance companies are still a little bit out of date. And they're like, well, we need to see range of motion improvement, or we need to see X, Y, and Z. And we know that some of these really simple, still reliable measurements, like they're easy to get. And that's why insurance companies like them, because, hey, it's just subjective. It's a number, takes out the subjective part of it. Is the person's range of motion getting better? Yes or no? MMT, or like sit the stand. Is the time getting better or not? Yes or no? If no, then it's hard for us to justify payment for the person to keep getting treatment. So these developers, they try to create technology to, here's a solution where we can replace people, and the insurance companies will like this. They'll buy into it. It's cost effective, and let's implement it, across the country for anyone that has an insurance plan with us. But for Mike Arash and I, it's like, what these developers are focused on, they're focused on the wrong thing. Like this isn't what's going to get people better. So I think the $1 billion question is, how can we leverage AI, virtual and augmented reality, to actually get people better? And that's what we're focused on with our product. Is at the end of the day, we just need to get people to move. Yeah. So how do we make this product as easy as possible to watch exercise videos and exercise?
Yeah. Let me ask you with that, because you said the right thing. You need to embrace the technology, the AI, the augmented reality, even virtual reality for this space and rehabilitation, not kind of push it back. And it's how you adapt it and bring it in to work with how you treat. And but importantly, I'm going to tell you, you mentioned something I wanted to say. Your quote upstairs, and trying to rush to get something done. You don't have to be first. You just have to be the best.
Yeah.
So
big time.
If you slow it down, do a better job, you can compete against the big companies and ones that have more money. But with what you have and all the video content you've developed, and then utilizing AI to help because a lot of times it's like someone needs to follow up and like, oh, how do they progress? Who's writing that program for them? And can it be automated in a sound way that's appropriate? And you guide the AI with that. In a sense, that's a way to utilize AI. So then you're not hands-on, advancing this individual in their program. They're using the exercises. It knows where they're at, how much weight they're doing, how many times a week, and how they're getting stronger or not, and then adjusts the program automatically. And that's a great way to use AI. So there's definitely real advantages to it. It's here. It's not going anywhere. It's how we're going to embrace it and utilize it in this space in healthcare and, physicians, medical doctors, PT, the whole thing.
I think the biggest thing that I hope we continue to leverage it and find ways to implement it in our own products is it gamifies the experience. Mm-hmm. Like to be able to get feedback, see how I'm moving, get coached do more of this, do less of that, counting my reps, keeping track of what I'm doing weight wise, and giving suggestions. Like, that is gamifying exercise and movements. And that can have a lot of positive reinforcements, at least for the person that likes it. And then having the option to turn it on and off. And then I think you're providing to consumers, hey, you have this available there if you want it and you need it. You can also just kind of opt out of it if you just like old-fashioned exercise. And options is what's important. The big thing for us is we want people to be able to take control of their health. And, you need an option in order to get that started. And I think the more options that people have, the more likely people are going to be successful with taking control of their health.
Yep. No, that's good. And I actually brought something for you as a little gift.
Okay.
And it has a little AI built into it, but it's a shift. It's a running coach. Now, you obviously do some running with your triathlon
a little
training,
bit,
correct? So I'd be interested to have you try that and just see it. You wear a sensor on your shoe and like a heart rate monitor, one on your chest, and it tells you based on your running how to improve your performance. And it will coach a novice individual on how to run properly, and an advanced knowledgeable runner how to kind of tweak their gait, stride, frequency, rate, all that stuff. So it's kind of fun. And
you know me too well. You had me at the gadget. So wrist wearables can accurately track your sleep, including things like your sleep patterns and sleep stages.
Yes.
Not overrated.
Not overrated.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, it's one of those things, I'd say underrated, because it's gathering that data and then how it's used, but they're very good at it. I mean, the technology is great to monitor that. Some people don't like to sleep with a watch. They'll sleep with a ring and on or something different, maybe even a clip on their ear. But that's, you sleep on your ear. It's a little awkward. And there's all kinds of different techniques they've tried. Literally mouthpieces if you grind your teeth at night.
Well, that's how I broke my tooth.
Grinding.
I'm so stressed from grad school. Broke my damn root canal.
We didn't stress you out.
Not you.
There. So there's a lot of ways to kind of capture that information, and it's very good information to have. People underrate the value of sleep and nutrition. They just think, oh, I train, I'm good, and they don't sleep well. There's more and more data coming out every day on the importance of sleep for both physical and mental health. And to be able to track that, now it's easy to do. You don't have to have, all these electrodes placed on your head when you're sleeping at night. You can wear, a watch or a band or something, and it's definitely underrated, the value of that.
Why would you suggest to someone to track their sleep?
The influence on physiological function is vast in the body. I mean, there's, studies for the last 50 years showing the importance of sleep. But nowadays in our society, people are like, oh, I don't need sleep, especially the younger we are. We're like, yeah, I can get away with a few hours a night. That will add up. And physiologically, it's not good on our health from many different systems in the body. And there's just too much to cover with that. But general health and wellness, people think, oh, I can go to bed at midnight and get up at 5 a.m. and that's not enough sleep. The 8 to 9 hour thing is great. A lot of us can't do that, but that's where you really get the best recovery, and not necessarily from exercise. If you exercise, it's even better to make sure you get that sleep. The body needs time. There's shifting of cerebral spinal fluid in the body during sleep, not just the brain waves and what's happening. And so again, a lot of research on that, but because people are like, I function fine. I have a coffee in the morning and, I'm getting through the day but long-term longevity is influenced by lack of sleep during your youth, and that can add up over time. So, getting sleep's important. And the more you exercise, the more you should sleep. And you may see effects of, chronic fatigue and overtraining, we call it. And a big part of it's sleep. And that's something we look at. We look at changes in hormones. We look at the association with sleep, and then ultimately performance. And a lot of times it's in athletes because that's what matters. If the athletes aren't on the field because of overtraining or fatigue issues, then the team's not winning, and then the money's not coming in, and it's a snowball effect. And so
yeah, sleep is important. Here is another good one. I'm interested to get your opinion on this. Everyone should wear a glucose monitoring device to gain more personal insights at least once in their life.
Okay, when you say wear a glucose monitor, you mean just once for 7 days or something? Or are you talking about for a year?
I guess what would be the minimal effective dose, right? I think I've heard 7 days can be insightful, 30 days can be more insightful. I'm sure a year is very insightful, but
well, now that we have, glucose monitors, you can literally just wear a little patch on the arm and get great information from that. I'd recommend it for everybody to do because it makes you aware of that. You're like, okay, wear it for a couple weeks and eat your normal diet and see where your glucose is based on your diet. And because, type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance is a big issue in the United States and in other countries as well. And so monitoring that, just having an idea, even if you don't use a glucose monitor, routinely or indefinitely, to get an idea based on your normal diet, kind of what your glucose intake is and where you fall on that scale for health.
Have you done it before?
Nope.
Me either. So,
but
I've heard about it.
I have access to them, and believe it or not, I haven't done it, and I probably should now that we've had this conversation.
Well, maybe not this time of year. I mean, we just had Thanksgiving last week.
We did.
I mean, it's a double-edged sword. So I am curious, though. Maybe once.
Well, all good things, too. Diet, this is what I tell people, too. I get asked a lot about nutrition and diet, and should I do this diet or that diet? And I'm like, look, what works for you is important, but simply cutting your calories, eating the same that you always eat, just less of it, is the easiest way if you're looking at losing weight or getting healthier. And, it's important to do what you can do. People that make these drastic changes in their diet, they just don't last long term. And it's hard on them physically, it's hard on them mentally. And so just reducing your calories a little bit, slow over time, and adding in exercise. Even if exercise, people are like, I've been exercising for 3 months and I haven't lost 2 pounds. And I'm like, doesn't matter. You are healthier. I guarantee you. Yeah. If we did a VO2 max test on them, before and after those 3 months of exercise, I guarantee they'd be in better shape physiologically. And that's what's important for health. And we all have this, what do we look like? And that affects us psychologically, but Sark, where is he? Yeah, Arash, just for history, Arash was originally named, I nicknamed him Sark because he had too much muscle in physical therapy school. And I told him he's going to lose that muscle as he gets older. Sarcopenia is a loss of muscle mass with age. And so I nicknamed him Sark. That one's for you, Arash.
What people don't know is because of that, I think he was so self-conscious over the next 3 years because he would pack ground turkey breasts and brown rice and a dollop of ketchup. And he would put that in his bag at 7 a.m. And then we would be in your lab or downstairs studying at 7 p.m. And he would pull out that food. I'm like, dude, you're not going to eat that, are you? And he's like, I got to keep my muscle or else Schroeder's going to call me out. That's hysterical.
Good times.
Yeah, those were good times. When you walked in today and called him Sark, I'd start cracking up. Here's another good one. Since we're kind of talking about nutrition, handheld body fat tools are reliable and accurate.
Yes, they are. I've done a lot of work with bioelectrical impedance devices, which are usually the handheld devices available today. There's a lot of different ones out there. There's scales you can stand on. You can get them at Target and they tell you your weight and your body fat. There's ones you can hold in your hand. You even see them at Rite Aid in the Higgy Health Station. You can get your body fat for free on the blood pressure health station. And some of them cost $50. Some of them cost $25,000. They vary in how they work, but overall, there's an algorithm associated with it, and it does give you. It might not be accurate in the sense that if you compared to a gold standard like a DEXA scan for body composition of, oh, you have exactly 19% body fat, and then you use one of these devices and it tells you, oh, you're 15 or 16% body fat. So it's a little lower. It might not be accurate, but it's reliable. On a day-to-day basis, it'll tell you for the most part how your body composition is changing, and it can be important for people to use. I always recommend it over scale weight. Just because if someone's trying to change their body composition and weight or lose body fat and they're like, I'm not changing weight. I'm all, well, you might have gained muscle and lost fat, and so your weight's not going to change. But seeing what your body composition has done is important. And so they can be very effective. I recommend them for people and to use, and especially if they're tracking their body composition or weight.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, again, it's all about access. That's another big thing that we're focused on is just access. And like you pointed out, they're reliable. So even if it is overshooting something like a DEXA scan, well, at least it is consistently, overshooting, and it's reliable, and you'll just kind of work off of that number. Yeah. So I think that's good.
Well, I'll tell you, it's usually undershooting.
Oh, yeah?
I'll have bodybuilders come in that say, yeah, I'm 4% body fat. And they get on the DEXA and they're 7.5% body fat. And they're like, no way, it's wrong. I'm like, well, this is the gold standard, but whatever you were using is probably not right. And, a lot of the algorithms that are developed for devices tell you have a little less body fat than you probably really do.
No.
Because then you'll like it. You'll recommend it. It's a business. If you're selling a device and you have something that someone likes, they're going to tell someone else and they're going to buy it. So you don't want to tell them, you're fatter than you think you are, and that thing sucks, and they'll throw it out, and they're not going to tell someone else to buy it. So, think of the business aspects of, this.
Very true. It all makes sense now. Here's another good one. Only doing cardio will still keep you healthy as you get older.
Oh, where's Sark now? So again, here it comes. Sarcopenia, the loss of muscle mass with age. I'm a relatively thin guy, so I was
going to say, you still look the same that you did 10 years ago.
Maybe I haven't lost muscle mass. I do a good job trying to maintain it. But as we get older, we lose muscle. Even if we work out hard, we use weights, we're still, the way things happen with hormones and metabolism, we lose muscle, and that's where sarcopenia, the term, comes in. So it's very important as we age to make sure we don't just do cardio. Cardio is great for cardiovascular health, but we have to maintain our muscle mass as we get older for many reasons. Number one is function. We've got to be strong enough to get up out of a chair. How many older people have trouble getting out of a chair because they don't have leg strength? And so maintaining muscle mass is very important just to maintain balance and function as we get older. And it is important to have aerobic or endurance training as well for cardiovascular health, but we can't forget as we get older to maintain health by being involved in a resistance training or weight training program to kind of help with strength and prevent the loss of muscle mass.
I know that you've done a lot of research in your lab, especially in exercise physiology. I'm curious to get your input on this. I forget who tried to make it popular. I think it was like a thing during COVID, especially, or when people were doing like a lot of remote traveling and working, but just trying to find like this minimal effective dose of resistance exercise. Like, hey, if you work from home and you're at your desk most of the day, at least find a moment to like just do one set or two sets until fatigue of like a goblet squat, and just get as exhausted as you can. And if you do nothing else that day, at least that's still effective. Like, what have you seen or found, or what would you call BS on when it comes to what is like the minimal effective dose to maintain strength?
Yeah, I'd say there's no minimal effective dose, because if you're doing anything, it's going to be good. And if it's just body weight squats at your desk and you do 10 of those a day is better than doing nothing. So defining like what is the goal of that minimal effective dose is the big thing. And, to build muscle, that's challenging. You've got to put in the work. Muscle, maintaining it is not as hard. You can do isometrics and stuff while you're sitting at your desk and contract the muscle, and that will help maintain muscle mass. But to build muscle, you've got to put in the work. Doing a couple sets of one exercise probably isn't going to build muscle. It'll maintain it, but not likely build it. That leads into a lot of the research I've done too. People are lazy inherently. They want a pill that will do what exercise does. And I've done a lot of work with steroid hormones and research, and it's become a multi-billion-dollar industry after about year 2000, primarily in men, but also in women. And because it's taking testosterone as androgen therapy, can be effective at maintaining or building muscle mass in older adults. And in women, it helps protect muscle mass as well, but it's very protective of bone mass. So it can be effective for both men and women, but that's abused. They get more than they should from their doctor because hey, I'm getting bigger. And, a lot of the studies we've done are focused on improving health, not making bodybuilders. So we show improvements in activities of daily living in older adults and function. And yeah, they'll lose fat and they gain muscle, but you don't go, oh, they look like a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
But you combine that with exercise, and we don't need research to know if you take an androgen or a steroid like testosterone and you work out, lift weights, the combined effort there is additive, and you're going to get bigger, stronger muscles. But just lifting weights is super important as we get older. And I encourage all the people I work with to do that at some level. Even if it's a little bit, it's still helpful.
A couple of things. Having a flashback to one of your lectures, you showed us the image of the mice as well as the bull, the ones that, and I taught this when we would teach BFR courses. I literally found those images on the internet and added them. And it was like, these are animals that they have that, they block that receptor. Myostatin.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're just like absolutely yoked all the time, and they do nothing.
Yeah.
And then, so that was one funny thing that I wanted to share with you. And the other thing was, I feel like I was so fired up for your class, and even Arash and I was, because when I was like first looking up your name, when I was a student, I remember, I don't know if you can speak to it or not, but weren't you involved in a study where like you were implementing testosterone in professional athletes, like post ACL? And like, weren't you involved in like one really famous athlete? We can cut this out if we need.
We won't talk about the athletes, but yes, we've done work, and that's applying, again, steroids has a stigma of like, oh, bodybuilding, but it's been used in the clinical setting. And we've demonstrated with studies, particularly in the ACL recovery, if you start giving someone testosterone at the time of their injury and following through surgery, that recovery is better. And there's a lot more than just being stronger and building muscle mass. It reduces fat infiltration into the muscle. It reduces inflammation and helps recovery. And so we see that people recover better if they have a given level of testosterone in their system. And it's different depending if you're a man or a woman, but it can be very effective.
So this may be getting deep, but I remember reading one study, and it was like when an ACL ruptures, there's this huge dump of myostatin in the body. And is that because when we get injured, you talked about it earlier, building muscle, it is hard work to do, and muscle is such expensive real estate in the body. Does the body physiologically reactively do that because it knows that it has to take all that energy and resources to usually maintain that expensive real estate, and we can no longer afford this, and now we have to put it into the injury to help it heal and recover?
Yeah. You raise a perfect point, and surgery itself is catabolic. And what does that mean? It means you lose muscle mass just by having surgery. And people are like, well, why? Is it because I was sedentary? Well, yeah, that will contribute. You're not using the muscle if you're sedentary afterwards. But the big issue is, and it's kind of what you touched on there, your muscle has a lot of protein, and it's a metabolic organ, but it provides amino acids and the important regulators for the immune system. And so when you have an injury or you're sick, you're going to rely on skeletal muscle protein to boost your leukocytes, white blood cells in your immune system, to help with inflammation recovery. And so you lose muscle mass in that sense. And that's why certain diseases are so prolific, in that you lose so much muscle mass that actually death is imminent. And they say you lose about 30 of your muscle mass from disease that you're likely going to not survive. And so it is a reservoir for that. And that's why it's so important to maintain your muscle mass, protect it. And that's why, there's cases, it started with AIDS wasting syndrome. Some of the early work I got involved with, the big thing was giving people that had AIDS and they're losing muscle mass, steroids, appetite stimulators, getting lots of protein in their diet to try and maintain that muscle mass, because the body's just using it to try and fight the disease.
That's interesting. I didn't know that part about the immune system, but it does make sense, because I got sick a few weeks ago, and I feel like now my nickname is Sark over the next couple of weeks.
Two of you.
Well, and then doing all the triathlon training, I mean, it's so hard. You kind of have to pick and choose what it is that you want to accomplish and when. So this fall is, okay, eat as much as I can, lift as heavy and as frequent as I can to just get as strong as possible. Because when January hits, I mean, I'm going to be wasting. I'm going to be wasting away, pounding the pavement, spending a lot of time on the bike. And yeah, I've been called a land athlete. This was new. A month ago, I was swimming, and this guy's like, he's like, how long have you been swimming? Where are you working for? I was like, oh, I'm signed up for, an Ironman. And he goes, are you a land athlete? And I'm like, you mean, did I play sports growing up on the ground? I was like, yes. He goes, yeah, you look like a land athlete. So yeah, I got to spend a lot of time in the pool come January. And it's just so hard to then try to it's even a win if I just maintain the muscle and strength that I had. But it's hard. It's very hard.
Do you track that? Do you track your body composition?
Well, I have a scale. Phases? I have a scale that clearly I liked, that I picked because it gave me good numbers. And yeah, I think that's why I really enjoy the Garmin. Mm-hmm. I really enjoy the Whoop. And yeah, now that I've had a few cycles, COVID happened. I got in the running because I lost access to a stair climber, a bike, you name it. So then I ran a marathon. I was like, okay, that's fun. Now let me try triathlon. And then I did my first 70.3. And then, okay, I did it. Now let me do it faster and let me get better at it. So then I did my second 70.3 this past May. And now that I've had a few cycles of training where I know that I can't just go for a 12-mile run and eat a box of pretzels and goldfish. There has to be nutrition at the plan, sleep. I'm really excited for this bout of training because number one, it's going to be a big challenge. I'm doubling everything and doing a hard course with Ironman Lake Placid. So I really have to dial in everything that I'm doing. And then more importantly, okay, I'm really familiar with the schedule. It's not as overwhelming. And now that it requires less energy to kind of focus on everything, now I can put a little bit more time and energy into my paces, how fast I am, VO2 max, all the weight that I'm lifting, etc. So I am really excited to track more this year and reflect on what my numbers were the past couple years. So even this go around, I took time off from August, formal training basically since June, July, until January. And then that's when I'll start working with a coach again. But I was like, hey, let me just look at my training stress score the last 3 years when I started working with a coach. And I said, okay, I just kind of need to be there, ideally even a little bit higher by the end of December. And then when January hits, okay, I'm kind of picking up where I need to be. So that I decrease the risk of injury and, decrease the risk of overtraining. So, yeah, and I want to do the VO2 max testing. So I know I've been trying to connect with Jason and you. So,
you haven't done a VO2 max test yet?
Been a while. No, I haven't done one recently, and I meant to do it over the summer because right after Ironman St. George, Jackie and I, we went backpacking and we did Tour de Mont Blanc. So I walked like 80 miles in 10 days with a 40-pound pack. And I'm like, all right, I'm light. I'm feeling strong. Like my knees hurt a little bit. But outside of that, this would be the peak time to like measure my VO2 max. I was acclimatized. I had altitude in my blood.
Yep.
And then I didn't do it.
Yep.
So here we are.
We'll get you tested, get a baseline on you.
Well, now we've set the floor, so now I can only go up.
Yeah.
Versus I may have only found the ceiling. Here's a really good one. Okay, so I was like, this was a light bulb question. I'm excited to hear your thoughts. Not eating or sleeping enough after working out is worse than not working out at all. True or false? Or overrated or underrated?
For health?
Yeah, let's go with health.
Yeah, underrated. You gotta have sleep and nutrition. Without even, if you don't work out, you're gonna go downhill unless you take care of that. And I kind of touched on it earlier, but it's so important to have health and nutrition. And again, people love their comfort foods. They like to stay up and watch TV and binge some show or party on weekends and not get sleep. And, I get it. That's fun, but health, it's going to take a toll. And that's where balancing with exercise. Okay, you do some of that. Everything in moderation is okay, but you got to balance your sleep and nutrition. Add that exercise component in, and you're going to do what you can do to live the healthiest life.
What about the person that's listening right now that is starting to feel guilty because they have had bad sleep and bad nutrition in their life up to now? What do you tell them to get them fired up?
There's always time to change, but start slow and don't do both at the same time. Again, it's not, I got to go to bed at 9:00 every night and get up at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. And sometimes it's not feasible. People have kids or dogs or, deadlines and work they do at home. And, but you got to try to make an effort, chip at it slowly. If you normally go to bed at midnight, try going to bed at 11:30 or 11 and work with that. And nutrition, same thing. Like I said, just small changes is really important because you won't stay with it if it's too drastic. People do for a while and they change their body composition, their health, and they feel good, but it's hard to maintain that. Stresses them out, and then they go back to what they were doing before, and sometimes to a greater extent.
Marginal gains.
Yeah.
Just 1% better every single day, even if it's a 0.5%, it is progress.
Yeah.
And progress is how you get momentum, and momentum is how you build habits. Yeah. Well, it's like that famous line, slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? So just take it easy, smooth it out.
Yeah. People like to have things change fast, and it's hard. That's why people want to take something or some new supplement that will accelerate, or some new drink, protein shake. Oh, this worked for so-and-so, or,
we can blame a lot of that. We can blame social media reels for that. You see what someone has worked on for 2 years, recapped in a matter of 8 seconds.
Yeah.
So we did that to ourselves. They are fun to watch though. Yeah. You've talked a little bit about, your passion now and what it is that you're doing day to day. And we've talked about, hey, what maybe the future will be, but would you say that there's anything super trendy right now, or what everyone should kind of keep their eyes out on going into 2025 with it around the corner from like a tech, health, fitness, rehab point of view?
Yeah, I want to kind of touch 2 points to that. I mean, first of all, I think it's going to be the AI in the exercise space, and how is that going to influence coaching, and or when I say coaching, like exercise prescription, trainers, and what people can get online that will AI will help get them there without a personal coach doing it. And I think it'll be pretty effective. So that's coming. It's how are we going to accept that, right? And so there's a lot to be learned with it, and what AI will do, I don't know, but it'll be fun. So that's exciting. That's coming, and I'll be interested to be a part of that. We're already starting some things with it, but the big thing that I often see, and I'm actually building some research around that with my current graduate PhD student, is with women's health and exercise. You hear a lot about, and this is in the social media, about when to train during the menstrual cycle. And, oh, this is when you can perform because you're at the best based on your hormones. And there's no science behind any of it that's out there now. It's really bad. And, women are changing their training around what's put out there in social media and training during the menstrual cycle status. And so we're starting some work in that space and looking at the influence of endogenous sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, throughout the menstrual cycle and how it affects recovery. And that can be applied, that's recovery from exercise, but it'll be recovery from injury and tissue healing. I mean, there's a lot that's just underserved in women in the research space. I mean, you look at studies, and about 10% of studies in the sports and exercise space for recovery is in women, about 10%. So 90% in men. And you can't say that a woman's body with the different hormones responds the same as men. I mean, men have 10 to 12 times more testosterone than women, but women have 10 to 12 times more estrogen. And so very different responses to metabolism and healing and recovery. And so I think that's an important area. I've dabbled in it in research over the years, but now we're starting to do a lot more. We've gotten some funding support from some industry partners to even do some of that work.
I was going to say, why do you think we are where we are with that demographic being underserved? Is it just there hasn't been an interest in funding? Because I mean, there's plenty of politics to it, I know. And
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is stemmed from sports where you have a lot of money in male sports. And so they want to know what's happening with the athlete, and that trickles down to the average person. There's just a lot less spent in women's sports on research, but in research in general. I mean, some of the first work I started doing was looking at bone density in young women and exercise. And because we build bone density with resistance training as we're young, that's important to help offset osteoporosis. If osteoporosis occurs 5 times more likely in women than men, so there's focus there. But again, the training, it just hasn't been there for exercise. And, women that play sports and, they're having their menstrual cycles, and certain estrogen levels can affect things. Estrogen's anabolic, and it can affect psychological state, physical state, how you heal, how you perform. And so maybe there's an optimal time for performance. If you're an Olympic athlete, that can have a very, grave, influence on your performance, based on that. So understanding it's super important to be able to help women. And then also just for training, if they're feeling bad because of the hormones and how it affects, it might make sense. So we need to know more.
Yeah, I mean, what was amazing to see this year was the progress made with a league like the WNBA. You have polarizing players coming out of college that have they have social media followings, right? It's like what social media has done. These platforms like Instagram and TikTok, they have democratized power. Before it was, do you have capital? Do you have influence just from whatever the label may be, or like the setting that you're put into when you're born? And now social media has completely democratized the ability to have influence. And I think we'll continue to see more marketing dollars, more awareness come to these women's professional leagues. And I think you hit it on a nail where it's like, hey, just there has to be more money that flows into these leagues, which will ultimately, drive interest to fund studies as to, okay, well, how can we better support these athletes and these women? So it's definitely fun to see. The sky is the limit for female sports, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, even with the Olympics, I mean, we saw now we finally had 50% women, 50% men in the Olympics. And So right there should show you we need to focus on, the research and the information around women's health and exercise and athletics and performance.
Yeah. It's awesome. Todd Schroeder, Dr. Schroeder. What else would you want to leave our audience with today? This has been awesome. I really enjoyed having you on. You caught me by surprise with some of your responses, but yeah, what else would you want to share with the Rehab audience? Because you helped build it. So
yeah, well, I'm just impressed you still remember some of the lecture material you were bringing up there in our talks. And I remembered your tooth, but I didn't want to bring that up. You did, so that's great. And but again, it's a space I'm passionate about in health and wellness, and love technology and being able to combine that, and knowing that every year it's just exponential in the growth in technology, and it's getting cheaper, it's getting better. We're going to see more of it. And then really to, the audience and those, maybe you're an athlete, maybe you're, just the average person, and you don't like technology. You might find something though that motivates you. And if it motivates you to do exercise and stay healthy, use it. You don't have to use all of it. You don't have to try all of it, but see what works for you. Or if you have a friend that said, yeah, I really like this, try it and see. And if it motivates you, whether it's tracking nutrition or, body composition or performance or, the volume load you're doing with your training. I mean, there's just lots that you can do with technology. And
steps, sleep,
yep.
3 sets of 10. I mean, we covered a lot today. Todd,
all right.
It was awesome.
Yep.
Appreciate you, sharing your wisdom, time, and knowledge with us. It caught me off guard with a few things today. And yeah, I know that everyone's going to love this. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Great to be back with the gang.
Sorry. Todd, how can people get connected with you? That's if you want them to get connected with you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can be reached through my position at USC, and that through emails easy, eschrode@usc.edu, or through my private company, K2 Sciences. You can look up k2sciences.com and reach me through that.
Nice. We'll add all that good info to the show notes, and yeah, we got to connect after this, because now we got to test my VO2 max.
We do.
Yeah.
I owe you that.
Awesome. Thanks, Todd.
Okay. Thank you.